Hello, folks, and welcome to Technion's Data Pipeline webinar series. My name is Jonathan Agee. I am the Chief Technology Officer here at Technion Data Solutions. My pleasure to welcome you to our webinar today. Today, we're going to be covering the topic of Snowflake as a data platform and using Snowflake for data sharing. So we're super excited about that. So before we get into that topic, though, I'd like to do just a quick introduction of who is Technion and what are we all about. Just to give a little bit of background about the company, Technion is a full-service data solutions consulting firm. We really cover the end-to-end gamut of services around data and analytics. We were founded in 1998, so been around a little while and have gotten to see the market really evolve around data and analytics, which has been super exciting. We are a Texas-based company in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We've had the privilege of serving many clients over the years. Lots of big and small companies. Some right here local in Dallas, but also many across the country and in other countries as well. So just to tell a little bit more about kind of our practice areas, we focus our work all around data and analytics, but these 4 practice areas are how we break it down. So data pipelines, as you heard, this is our data pipelines webinar series. So we look at data pipelines as really everything that gets data ready for people to consume it, right? Taking it, doing things like data warehousing, data prep, all of those sorts of things that move data into the locations where it can be used and made sense of. Data visualization is our practice area for that visual analytics, right? Showing the data to your end users. And then we have deep expertise in data science, all things advanced analytics, whether that's AI, machine learning, predictive, all of that. And then another major practice area for us is data governance, helping folks really manage and govern the end-to-end life cycle of data, security, quality, all of those sorts of things that go along with data governance. So we have been privileged over the 20 years that we've been in business to be recognized by many of our key partners in the industry. We are a Snowflake partner. That's who we're going to be talking about today. And we've been a Snowflake partner for several years now and have had the privilege of working on many Snowflake deployments. We've also been recognized by other partners like Alteryx and Tableau as their partners of the year. And then we have several other partnerships that fit in very complementary with those partners like Snowflake. We partner with Matillion, which you'll understand is an ELT tool for preparing your data on Snowflake and other cloud data warehouses. So just a little bit more about the webinar series. You'll find on our website recordings of the first several webinars that we have done around data pipeline strategy, as well as automated data quality and wellness with Validator, which is a product that Technion has in the market. And then our last webinar was exploring Matillion. And today we're looking at Snowflake as a data platform and for data sharing. And then going forward, we have a few more webinars coming up in this series. We have a webinar just next week, next Wednesday, about digital transformation with Rarescape, another one of our key partners. And then we do have a more generic cloud strategy and data pipelines coming up in August. Some housekeeping notes about the webinar. We will be having a Q&A time at the end. So if you do have questions throughout, please don't hesitate to use the Q&A panel in the webinar. we will either answer those in the Q&A panel, or have a time at the end of the webinar where we will answer them. Also, I just want to say, as you hear this webinar, all about exploring Snowflake, and we're expecting to have people from all different use cases of Snowflake, all different knowledge about Snowflake. We are going to be having some polls that will pop up on your screen. And these polls are going to be really helpful for us as presenters to be able to really address your questions and where you are at with understanding Snowflake and the product and everything, as well as being able to learn, and I believe you will be able to see the results anonymized from your fellow attendees. And so you'll get a sense for where other folks are at and how they're interpreting and understanding the things that you're talking about here on the webinar. And so one last thing, at the end of the webinar, what we would love to do, what Technion as a Snowflake partner would love to do, is have an opportunity to talk to you about what you've learned on this webinar, and really to dive into details through a design thinking session around whether or not data sharing is something that makes sense in your business and for you personally. So with that, I want to introduce our speaker for this webinar. So Jim Kacha is with us today. He is a Snowflake partner engineer. He works closely with our team here at Technion, crafting solutions and responding to customer needs. And so he will be presenting the Snowflake story and telling us more about Snowflake. So welcome to the webinar, Jim. Thanks for joining us today.
Great, thanks for having me. Appreciate the invitation. And I'm not sure, but I think one of those questions, if it's not already posted out there, will be coming up shortly. Just kind of your personal background and experience with Snowflake, just to kind of get a sense of the audience. But wanted to just kind of quickly just give the Snowflake story in the background and kind of set the stage for the conversation today. Snowflake was founded back in 2012 by two Oracle architects. And they really thought there has to be a better way to go about cloud data warehousing and how to go about solving the problems that were in existence back then. And they founded Snowflake back then and were generally available in 2015 in the West AWS region only. Since then, we've gone through a lot of growth, primarily early on focused on data warehousing, but since then have really grown out to the data platform space. And I'll talk a little bit about those areas in just a bit. Also, since then, we've been recognized in the industry, not only for our customer service, but on Gartner being in the top quadrant of data management. And a lot of high profile firms have invested inside Snowflake, including Capital One and Salesforce being the latest one that we've done earlier in the year, really allowing us to have not only significant funding, but great partners in where we want to take the product and where Snowflake plans to go in the future. And that's proven out by the fact that we now have over 4,000 customers in just the last few years, and we're adding roughly about 500 customers a quarter. Here are some of those customers just at a glance, and you can see they're all sizes, all verticals, and really cover the gamut across industries in terms of being able to serve their business problems and their needs using the Snowflake solution. As I mentioned, back in 2012, and when we went generally available back in 2015, Snowflake was primarily a cloud data warehouse. We were the first cloud data warehouse built in the cloud, for the cloud, only in the cloud, trying to solve a lot of the issues that data warehousing had encountered up to that point. Since then, we've expanded and are really now truly a cloud data platform globally, allowing our architecture to solve many other data needs and or complementing them in some cases. So for example, the data warehouse, replacing such areas as Oracle, SQL Server, Teradata, Redshift, but also things such as the data lake and security analytics. And our customers really finding use cases in those spaces because of the functionality and the features inside Snowflake. Also, our customers are starting to get into more data applications and complementing their data science practice with Snowflake because of the efficiencies and the cost and the scalability found within inside Snowflake. And then lastly, our data exchange and data sharing, which I'm going to be spending a little bit of time on in a bit. And this is something we're really proud of and really think it's going to change the way people think about using data, not only internally within their own environments, but with their partners and their customers and other relationships that were either difficult or costly to do in the past. And I'll spend quite a bit of time on that. All of this is across all three of the major cloud data platform providers. So all of this data and all of this functionality is not only across regions, but across cloud providers all around the world, allowing Snowflake customers to really have a global data mesh for solving their business needs. I'm going to spend just a few minutes when we talk about, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, one of the questions that we did want to ask is of those areas, probably many people are familiar with Snowflake as a cloud data warehouse, but wanted to keen interest in other areas that may be of a further conversation that you might like to have or have interest on that we can expand on as well. As I mentioned, just wanted to spend a few minutes on the requirements of what we feel is truly needed for a cloud data platform and what allows us to have those 6 different workloads be able to be used inside one platform to solve several different business cases. First of all, one platform, one copy of data, many workloads. With inside Snowflake, all of the data is centralized. It's all in one common repository. There's no copying of the data. There's no need to have hardware provisioned well ahead of time. The data is available in a centralized area when you need it. And it's one platform. It's not 10 or 15 different services that you're trying to plug together with your architecture and your security, figuring out the costing. All of it is managed within the Snowflake platform because that is what Snowflake does. We focus on the cloud data platform. Secondarily, when you're dealing with the cloud, you're dealing with data, it has to be secure and governed at all times. Not only the multiple levels of encryption at rest, but also in motion. The ability to see who's doing what at all times within your environment and be able to react to it. The able to have data transferring in and out of your environment, knowing that it's being authenticated and encrypted at all times, every time, and not have to worry about it. It's really the price of admission when anybody talks about the cloud and sensitive data within inside the cloud. Thirdly, our near zero maintenance as a service. Simply putting a database in the cloud does not make it a service. With inside Snowflake, things such as patching and upgrades and downtime, the ability to have to do lots of performance to actually use the data that you're putting in the system is largely eliminated inside Snowflake. For example, we do not have statistics that users have to run. We do not have indexes. All data, including semi-structured such as JSON, can be loaded in its raw format. And as the data is being loaded, we are analyzing and storing that data to get the most optimal performance immediately after that. Really eliminating a lot of the time DBAs and other team members are spending to try and get an environment to a state where the large community can actually get value out of the data that you have in your data environments. And then lastly, unlimited performance and scale. Because Snowflake separates compute and storage, we are able to fully be elastic in both of those independently, but still working together. That means you can not only scale vertically, but horizontally, instantaneously across different groups without any destruction to any jobs that are going on. And each individual group can have their own warehouse or compute cluster size to meet their specific workloads for the time that they're needed. The ability to separate the storage from the compute allows us to do that. So we don't have contention. We don't have to worry about concurrency issues. Snowflake is able to expand and contract based off of your needs, and you're only paying for the time that you're using it for the size of the environment that you need to use. So you don't have to worry about systems that are up 24/7, but you may be only using them for 4 or 5 hours a day. So I just wanted to go through a quick kind of example and architecture and go a little bit in kind of a day in the life. And it starts with the data being centralized. So if you look at the example here, all the data is centralized and we have data loads, ETL processes, both structured and semi-structured that are coming in throughout the day. Other teams and other transformations that are being popped up, all of these environments having different size compute clusters, all with different times of the day they're needing it, all with different applications that are able to seamlessly tie inside Snowflake. Not only that, a given individual instance, the data science in this one, for example, can expand query by query instantly to meet the needs and the demands of their workloads at that given time. Once again, completely independent of all the other workloads going on, but still focused on that same centralized data source to get their workloads accomplished. For other areas, such as marketing and BI reporting, we have the ability to scale horizontally so that as new users come on, we automatically expand out to prevent any contention from users accessing those environments so that they can see a seamless experience within their reports and not have that lag and delay that it's quite often with other solutions. With that as well, we have the ability to share this data with your business ecosystem. And this is what I'll be getting into in just a little bit. But the ability to, instead of pushing data out, sending data out of your environment, you're inviting your business ecosystem into your environment to share the data. So you are going to get that same performance. You're going to get that same centralized location, and you're going to give that with all of the security that Snowflake offers within inside its data sharing and data exchange environments. So as I touch on that, I'm going to get a little bit more and dive into the data exchange specifically and talk about some of the advantages that a data exchange might offer an organization and how it might be used. So with that, I just want to pause for a second here. I'm not sure if the question came up. I saw one pop up, but wanted to talk about a little bit about some of the issues that you have with data sharing in terms of security, lack of resources, latencies, cost, lack of support. These are all things that we hear that have been quite common in the old world ways to exchange data, and just wanted to kind of get a feel for what types of issues that you're running into today. So as I talk about this, wanted to just kind of recap the traditional ways of data sharing, and whether this is through FTP or APIs, building ETL pipelines, there's quite often a lot of copying and moving data. And if you're sending the same data source to multiple customers or multiple vendors, it's going to constantly increase the maintenance and the cost. There's delays in the data from the time that it's updated in your system to the time that it can get to the third party or the customer and have them actually upload it into their system. It can be error prone. The lack of not being real time brings in a number of issues, and having different understandings of what data you have at a given point becomes error prone. And then obviously it's unsecure. Once the data has left your premises, you largely lack control of that data and are under the control and hopefully following the NDAs that you have in place for those situations. With Snowflake, we took a different approach. Instead of sending the data out, we have consumers sharing the data in a single live copy of the data. There's no moving of the data, there's no copying, there's no ETL. The data is always live without delays. And you can personalize this with secure views so that any data or subset of data that you do not want to be shared, you can still protect and have in your environment, only limiting that data to the subsets that you feel are productive and necessary for the suppliers and customers that you're dealing with. Once again, this is completely 100% governed and revocable at any time, and globally available across cloud, cross region. So if you're dealing with somebody who may be using AWS in the West and somebody else who might be using Azure in Europe, you have the ability to do this. And I'm going to walk through an example of how quickly this can be done and how your customers and your suppliers and your vendors can go about getting access to this data in a very secure, very quick, very efficient way. Before I do that, I just wanted to talk about the 3 different offerings and kind of get you thinking a little bit about the different use cases that we've encountered. About 2 years ago is when Snowflake started with their direct share, one-to-one, where company A shares data with company B inside their Snowflake account. It's a read-only database that they're able to access as part of their BI or their data scientists or their ETL work, but the data still lives in company A's account. And it's still the same performance because the data is centralized, located within the cloud provider's data storage. So you have no latency with other types of solutions such as federation. It's immediate, it's quick, and it's secure. The second one that I want to talk about a little bit is the data exchange. And this is for an organization to stand up their own internal environment that they decide who the consumers, who the producers are, and it can be with internal departments, or it can be external where you're working with your customers and your suppliers to have that data hub that instead of exchanging this data through old school mechanisms, they're able to use that same centralized location within their Snowflake account, or the ability to have reader accounts, which are Snowflake accounts for customers that do not have a Snowflake account of their own, that you're able to provide as a Snowflake customer to them. And it really allows for many-to-many data sharing, but once again, data is never moving. You're instead inviting the consumers and the producers to join this network of data that you want to share. And then lastly, the Snowflake Data Marketplace. This one has been out for about a year or so. We announced it last summer at our summit. And this you can think of like as a data app exchange. And what you're able to do here is, if you're a data seller, put data out into the Snowflake Data Marketplace and get the attention or potentially sync up with other accounts that you may not have a relationship with, but for a variety of reasons, they may get value out of data that you may want to put out there. As a data consumer, all Snowflake accounts have access to all of this data that they can request on demand and bring into their ecosystem across a large variety of verticals and data sets, and which I'll show you in just a little bit. So there's really quite a different variety of use cases and how data sharing can be used inside the Snowflake environment that we'll dive into in just a little bit here. So real quickly, I wanted to share one example for the Snowflake Data Marketplace that's been in the news quite a bit recently, and that is around the COVID-19 epidemic or pandemic. We have a Snowflake customer in Europe called Star Schema, and what they've done is collect data from all across the world, from government agencies and hospitals and other healthcare organizations. And they've aggregated that data and they've engineered that data to try and create a environment that has an easy to use, quick access to a variety of statistics around COVID and what's going on in various parts of the country. What they decided to do is put that data on the data marketplace. So as they're updating and as they're aggregating, and they've loaded this to their Snowflake environment, they've allowed customers from the Snowflake ecosystem to subscribe to that. And we've had over 3,000 of our customers subscribe to this data set across the world that allows them to immediately access this data once the Star Schema company has published it to their database. No delays, instantaneous, no overhead, no administration. All they do is set up an environment in the marketplace, and behind the scenes, it's instantaneously able to be shared with all of our Snowflake customers. And it's being used for a variety of reasons. Healthcare organizations studying it to see where they can use data for good. Organizations understanding where the impact to their business is happening and making decisions on reopening and whether it's safe and whether it's starting to spread. A number of different decisions that if each of these companies tried to do it would be very time consuming, very expensive. With Star Schema using data for good and sharing this data, they've made an impact on a variety of different companies and organizations to quickly be able to use this data to help benefit their organizations. The most recent one is the state of California has published their data on the Snowflake Data Exchange. And anybody who wants access to that data can go out to the California site or use a free trial Snowflake account to be able to access that data and see everything that the state of California is publishing. The second one is the kind of the private data exchange. And I want to turn it back over to Jonathan and let him kind of describe a use case scenario that he's encountered and talk a little bit about the benefits of a private data exchange and some of the areas you may want to think about.
Thanks, Jim. So this is an area that we're really excited about at Technion, and I'm going to keep the discussion in the healthcare world here. Technion has had the privilege of working with several healthcare organizations and clients over the past 20 years, and that's a real deep area of expertise for us. And over the last several years working with Snowflake and multiple Snowflake customers, we've had the opportunity to work with several healthcare data aggregators. And so these would be the folks that bring together hospital data or data from various providers and aggregate it to, again, use data for good and provide that back to their constituents to create a much more cohesive view of an overall health system. And so using Snowflake, we've been able to help bring data together, ingest that data, and then through reader accounts and through data sharing back to their partners, create the opportunity for much faster, much more seamless sharing and visibility into that data. And I think for me, it's always very helpful to hear those specific examples of where, of how this can be utilized, and it makes it much more tangible into how could that apply to your business and thinking about that. And so what I've been challenged to think is every single partner relationship, vendor relationship, or customer relationship, what are the ways that I share data with them, or that they share data with me, or that I would benefit from more seamless sharing of data? And I think that's what we're all challenged with by Snowflake, is to say, how do we need to think differently about this concept of data movement and data sharing so that we can all work more efficiently?
Thanks, Jonathan. So I think there's just one more survey question that's out there, and it's kind of if any of these use cases intrigue you and kind of what would be most interesting based off of your scenario. Just have two more slides here, and I'm going to get into the demo and show how easy it is to set this up with inside a Snowflake environment. But I just wanted to stress once again, this is a virtual global data center. Snowflake is in all three of the major cloud providers across the world. We're adding new regions every quarter. So really the footprint of Snowflake in the cloud is pretty significant when you look at all of the different parts of the world and cloud providers that we've been able to stand up Snowflake and have that seamless experience with inside the one data platform. One last slide here is showing kind of some of the differences, because we do truly feel at Snowflake, this is something that was really in the minds of the founders back in 2012, and having this global community of data. And some of our competitors do have what they're calling data sharing or data exchange type offerings, but wanted to call out some of the differentiators here in terms of Snowflake, where we don't move the data. It's always live, fully governed and revocable at any time, with personalized shares, and once again, globally available cross-cloud, cross-region. So with that, I'll get into a little bit of a demo on how you would go about setting this up. Okay. So for those of you not familiar, this is the Snowflake UI or worksheet. Even though I'm using the worksheet, all of this data can be accessible through a lot of our technology partners, such as Matillion and Tableau, Looker, Data Robot, really a large ecosystem. But what I'll start with is right here in the data marketplace and show you a little bit about that. And what the data marketplace is, you can see here, is a collection of different companies that have decided to put their data out there. And within the marketplace, there's two ways to do it. Customers can immediately get the data, or they can request the data. And a lot of times the request part is to allow our data providers to build up relationships and have conversations with the parties that are interested, and use it kind of as a marketing one. You can see a lot of the different verticals in here. And since we've talked about healthcare a little bit, I'll show you the star schema one that I had for COVID-19. And within here, what you'll have is a description of what the data is, some samples of what it may look like, and documentation on what the data sets will be. And also contact information, help sites, legal terms, all of that information. But essentially, if you want this data in your Snowflake environment, you simply click data. The database name will come in here, and you decide who in your organization can have access to it. And for this example, I am just going to pick a generic one. Oops. Let's say public can have it. And with that, I accept the terms, create database. And what that does is allow me to have in my Snowflake environment access to that data. So you can see in here that star schema COVID-19 data set was added. I have different schemas with that information, with all the information, with all the different columns. And I can immediately start joining this data to any other data set in my environment. So to get a list of all these tables with all this information with a complete data dictionary took me about 3 seconds. And that's just the kind of speed in our data marketplace that allows us to be able to do that. On the other hand, the data share, if I wanted to share data with somebody outside of my organization, what I do is start by creating a share that I would like to do to an outbound. And I decide, yes, I'd like to do it. I'm just going to call it a name, give it a name. I'm going to select a database. And then I select a collection of tables and views that I want to share. You can decide on what's shared, what's not shared, and be able to essentially gather this information in one collection that we call a share. So even though the share is created, we have not granted access to it at this point. And what we would do there is add consumers. And we had the ability to add reader accounts or full accounts. And by simply selecting who you would like to share with, you have the ability instantly to now allow those customers, providers, vendors to have immediate access to that data. So you can see I'm in account demo 192 for this example. I'm going to jump over to this account right here. And right now there was no information in there. So if I go in there, it takes a few seconds to kind of sync up behind the scenes. But what we're going to see here is the ability for an additional share to be shown up here that they can decide then to create the database. So as that shows up, I'll let you know in here and inside the workplace, you can tell the difference between a share and a data that you own by this little notation that's up in the corner here. So you can tell all of these are shares. And if you go back to the database, you can see the origin of that data. So it's really easy to see what data is being shared in your environment versus which data is you're maintaining and managing through your own internal processes. Go in here. Oops. Like I said, it just takes a few minutes on there. Go back, make sure it saved correctly. Shares there. So once the share is within there, and I can show you an example of it here while I was waiting for that to sync up, is there's a number of inbound shares. So this Twitter feed is one that is being shared with me, but I have not exposed to my end users yet. So if you would like to do that, all you would do is click on the share, create database from secure share, name it, share. Once again, select the roles that you would like to be able to have access to that data. Create the database. Okay, and from the database side, you will instantly have the ability then to start using that data inside your environment. And there it is right there. And as the Twitter feeds are updated, we are instantaneously getting real-time access to that information. So if you think about and compare some of this workloads to having to export data, having to set up FTP sites, having to create APIs, putting the security around that, having the ETL process needed to upload it, making sure you're defining the data dictionaries, making sure that you're doing all of the QA on that data. This allows customers and accounts to share data quickly, seamlessly in a fully secured environment with all of the performance benefits that you get out of Snowflake, including the concurrency and the ability to scale up and down based off of your needs. And once again, this is completely able to use not only structured data, but semi-structured data in its raw format that you have the ability to then use ANSI SQL on top of that JSON to combine it to any other structured environment in your Snowflake database. So with that, I think I'll pause, coming to the end of the presentation, and see if there's any additional questions that you may have in that, or kind of additional detail that we might be able to get into and help answer at this point.
All right, so thank you, Jim, for the great demo. It's really cool to see how easy Snowflake has made it to share data in that way. Please, if you have any questions, we'd love for you to post those in the Q&A panel. And like I said at the beginning, what we would love to do with anyone who is really interested in this concept of data sharing, and even if you don't quite see how it would apply in your world, we would be delighted to have a meeting, have a session, help you ideate on what it could look like to do this sort of data sharing in your world. What kind of impact could that have to your business process, efficiency, all of those sorts of things. So if we could be of service to you in that way, please don't hesitate to reach out. We will be sending out the recording to everyone who registered. So if you registered, you will get that. Thank you. All right, we haven't really gotten any questions in the Q&A panel. I believe there was a question earlier, maybe through the chat, and it was about horizontal and vertical kind of growth and expansion in resources. And I think, Jim, that was something you mentioned. And Jim, I think you have 2 microphones going. Can you mute one of those?
Sure.
All right, so maybe that's better. Yeah. So Jim, the question is around horizontal and vertical scaling. And you mentioned the vertical scaling, really, where you can, take a workload and give it more horsepower, right? And for those who are new to Snowflake, maybe just touch on the horizontal scaling and what that means as well for workloads.
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, Snowflake has the ability and separates compute from storage. So within an environment that you're running, say on an extra small, which is a 1-node cluster behind the scenes, that may be for simple lookups, but as you're increasing loads where you're building aggregates or doing processing across billions of rows, you're going to need additional horsepower. Within Snowflake, if you have what we call a given warehouse, you're able to go from an extra small to a 4x large instantaneously, getting that extra compute node and being able to process it for that large workload at the given time that you need it. And as soon as you're complete with that, you can bring that workload down. So in many cases, what we find is our customers using larger warehouses to get their work done faster. And because of the increased caching, because of the increased size of the warehouses that you're using, it's actually overall cheaper for them because they're able to take advantage of that architecture in place and being able to change the size that they need for a given workload on demand, SQL by SQL, if they choose to, or they so desire.
Thanks, Jim. All right, do we have any other questions? Any questions about the data marketplace or about the exchange or any of that? So we have a question here, Jim, about data shaping. And so maybe that gets into kind of the data engineering workload that you have there, as well as data warehousing, and then also expanding upon that, kind of partner tools, and specifically Alteryx and how Alteryx works with Snowflake. So go ahead, Jim, and I can answer as well if you have if you have other areas you want.
Sure. Yes, Alteryx. Yes, you can definitely use Alteryx with Snowflake. We have a driver with them, and can use that as part of your internal processes. In terms of data shaping, I'm not sure if that kind of means like moving the data into different aggregations or subsets, but all of the data that is shared through this is essentially a read-only database. So you have the ability to put views on top of that. You can combine it with other data sets in your organization to do a CTAS, a create table as. If it's semi-structured data, you can determine what level inside that JSON record that you need to access, and actually could do self-joins at level 2 and level 3 within a JSON document. So if you think of a share as a read-only database, everything you can do in a database, you could do to a share, and kind of form that data to the way that fits your business needs in use.
Yeah, and maybe to expand upon that, so Jim, you mentioned that kind of in relation to shares. So there are specific things to know about shares, like you said, they're read-only. But within Snowflake, you know, the best practice is to bring data in its raw form, land it into Snowflake as quickly as you can with minimal transformation, and then really leverage the power of the Snowflake compute engine to do your transformation and data shaping inside of Snowflake. So for you know, a cloud data warehouse like Snowflake, we don't want to be pulling the data out and pushing it back in. And so specifically with Alteryx, you really want to take advantage of the in-database tools to do your data shaping as much as you can, because that's going to leverage that horsepower under the covers that Snowflake brings to the table, where you can really easily scale that up and scale that down and pay only for what you use. So that's what we typically recommend for customers, is make sure you're doing what we would call ELT instead of ETL, right? Bring that in, transform it in the database after you've loaded it. So hopefully that's helpful. If there's a particular use case that you're looking at and you're interested in, how could you do that? You know, Technion is a premier Alteryx partner, as well as Snowflake partner, and so we would be delighted to talk with you more about that.
And to your point is that's a lot of the reason a lot of our customers are looking at Snowflake as a data lake, where they're bringing in that raw IoT data or the raw formats, and allowing Snowflake to process it for their analysts and their data scientists without having to spend the time to do the ETL or ELT processes pre-Snowflake. So it's a great point, Jonathan.
All right, well, let's see if there's any more questions, and then if not, we really appreciate all of you joining us today for the webinar. We will be sharing the link out, so if you or others in your organization would benefit from it, we'd love to have you share it around. And thanks to Jim for joining us today and sharing about Snowflake and data sharing in the data marketplace.
Thank you.
All right, I think that wraps it up. Thank you, and everyone have a wonderful day and stay safe.